Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to discuss about email flow in Exchange Server 2010 and how to use Telnet utility to submit an email. First of all, I will start off with a brief introduction about me. My name is Tosif and I have been into IT since more than 3.5 years now, and currently working as a technical consultant for Exchange Server since last 2 years. Here is my Exchange Server, which has all three roles installed. Along with the Exchange Server, I have a Windows client that has Office 2013 or the Outlook 2013 installed. We'll use this client to test with the emails. Now let's go to the Exchange Server and try to understand some important component about the transport and the email flow. Uh, Currently we are on the Hub Transport Servers property, and on the Hub server by default we have two receive connectors that are created by the Exchange setup. First receive connector that we have is the client receive connector with the server name, which listens on port 587. When the clients are connecting to the Exchange server using the POP or the IMAP protocol, and when they try to send an email, if the email sending uh, as an anonymous user, they will use port 25 by default, or if the client is sending the email as an authenticated user, they will send the emails on 587. So that was the first uh, receive connector we have discussed. The second receive connector we have is default receive connector, which listens on port 25. Any inbound connection received by the Exchange server will be entertained by default receive connector that listens on port 25. I will take you through to some basic settings and the properties of the receive connector, the default receive connector. The first tab we have for the default receive connector is the general tab, wherein the important property is protocol logging level. So what does this protocol logging level does? If we set it to verbose, each and every connection coming from internet received by the default receive connector or the hub transport server will be logged somewhere on the Exchange server, that I will show you in the end of this video where to find the logs about the inbound connections coming on port 25. By default, the value set for this protocol logging level is none. I've made changes and set it to verbose. Other tab we have is the local IP binding, the local binding, and uh, we have the remote IP binding. That both these falls under the network tab, and so even for, like, each of these we have two types of binding, the IPv6 and the 4, the IPv4. IPv6 and IPv4, they both contain all available public and private IP addresses. Why do we have this? Is because we never know the email that we are receiving from the internet, it will come from which IP address. So on Exchange server, we should have a setting that lets each and every IP into the Exchange server, and the email is then processed. Third tab we have on default receive connector is authentication tab. All the authentication mechanism we see over here are required. By default, they are set, and they are also required, as I said. The last tab we have on the receive connector is permissions group. It contains 5 permissions. We will discuss about the authentication and the permissions group in some other video, because today's motive of doing this video is to explain how does an inbound email flow work. That's why we are not covering this part. But one thing in the permission group that we need to know is that the anonymous user permission So this anonymous user's permission on default receive connector, if we have it unchecked, like this is not checked, we will not be able to receive the emails from internet. That's all about the authentication and some important properties about the default receive connector. Now, about the inbound mail flow coming on the Exchange server from internet. First thing that is very important is the MX record. The MX record stands for the mail exchanger record, and that is the very important thing for any domain to be able to receive the emails. So the MX record will be having an IP address associated with the domain namespace for SMTP, and that will be pointed to the public interface of the firewall. As soon as the internet query on the internet happens and it finds your Exchange server's IP address, it directly goes to the firewall, and then the firewall bases the connection port that is coming from, which will be port 25. There will be a NAT rule set according to which all the connections coming from internet will go to the receive connector. Now, as soon as the email reaches to the firewall and before it reaches any receive connector, there is a process of receive connector selection. How does a receive connector get selected by the transport? There are certain criteria. So say for example, if I am receiving the email from the internet for with the IP address that is 192.168.1.1, what the receive connector selection process do is check for the remote IP range of that particular connection. If it falls under this remote range set on the receive connector, it will use the this particular receive connector. Or some domains they might have some customization, and they might only receive the email using a specific IP address. So in that case, they must be having a receive connector with a specific IP address set. So basis the IP address of the connection coming from internet, the receive connector will be chosen. Once the receive connector receives the connections, it puts the email into the submission queue. The submission queue is actually the transport database, the hub transport servers database, and that resides under so that resides under transport roles, the exchange install location. By default, the exchange gets installed in C drive, program files, Microsoft Exchange Server, and then V15. V15 folder or the directory has all these subdirectories, and under which the transport role directory has a folder called data. This data folder again will have some required directories. So for now we are discussing about the transport database. This mail.q file is the transport database. So whenever the email reaches the receive connector and it is accepted, the message is then put into the submission queue. Now the submission queue will not directly start processing the email, but what it does is it creates a copy of the email that is being received for the high availability purpose of the email. Uh, and for example, if we have multiple hub servers in the same Active Directory site, the copy of the message will be sent to the partner hub server, the other hub server in the same Active Directory site, for processing. So since we only have one server, that process will not be done over here. This transport server itself will process the email. So once the message is in the submission queue, there are four major steps that are taken. First step or the event is that is taken by the transport is the on submitted. This is the first event in the transport pipeline, wherein there is an AD lookup from the transport server to the Active Directory. It looks for the recipient in the email and check for that recipient with the help of the LDB call to the Active Directory, and verifies if the recipient added in the message are present in the Active Directory. The second important task of the transport is on resolve. Whenever the message is in on resolve phase, it will resolve the recipient. It will expand the distribution group if any. It will check if the recipient added to the message is email user, email contact, and so on and so forth. The third task that is performed by the transport is on routed. What happens in on routed phase is the respective route for any particular recipient is defined. Uh, basis the first step where there was a Active Directory LDAP call from the Exchange server to the Active Directory. It will come to know where does the user reside, the recipient reside, and on which database, and in case of DAG, where is the current active database mounted, on which server. The last phase or the the other phase that happens or the other event that happens while the email is in transport pipeline is the on categorization. That means there will be a conversion either into from MIME into MAPI or from MIME into from MAPI into MIME. So after all this processing, the transport knows if the recipient included in the message is internal, if the recipient included in the message is mail user, mail contact, distribution group, and transport also knows after the processing of a message where is the database currently mounted on which server, so that the transport servers component store driver can initiate a MAPI call with the database and can deliver the message to the recipient. So after doing all this processing, the store driver, a component of the transport service, initiates a MAPI call with the database, the respective database of the recipient, and then it converts the message from the received format, whatever it is, be it MAPI or MIME. If it is MIME, it will directly deliver the message to the store, or if there is a requirement of converting the message to MIME, it will directly convert the message and deliver it. Because why there is a process of conversion, like the message conversion, because the Exchange database, the store we have on Exchange server, it only understands one language, and that is MAPI. So any message that we receive for an internal user or the recipient is eventually converted to MIME format. Once all these processing are done, the transports component store driver delivers the mail to the recipient's database or the mailbox. So this was an idea about the inbound email flow, how it works on Exchange 2010. Now we'll try to submit an email using the Telnet utility and see how it works. So to perform a Telnet session and submit a message to any internal recipient, we need to type like Telnet localhost 25. This will initiate a session with the transport service, and it will give us the banner with the SMTP server's detail. And in case if we do not get this banner, that means there is something wrong with the transport service on the Exchange server. So first command that the source server or the internet server gives to the Exchange server is telnet and the namespace that we are using to receive the email from internet on port 25. And the second command is, we cannot do a backspace in the telnet session, so we need to be very sure what we are typing in the telnet session. After the source server gives EHLO to the Exchange server, the Exchange server tells that server these all are the protocol or the permissions that I would be needing, or the what are the connection type that I can initiate with you with source server. So these all are known as verbs shown by the Exchange server. The next command that the source server initiates is mail from. The mail from command will contain the sender of the message, the actual internet sender of the message. So it could be anything. Uh, so as we were discussing a permission on the receive vector, which is anonymous user, you might be thinking why the telnet or the transport has accepted this email or the sender. It may not exist on the internet. So the reason behind that is this anonymous user's permission. As we have checked, as we have this permission checked on the receive connector, that's why this sender was accepted by the transport. Now we'll move on to the next command, which the internet server will initiate with the exchange server, and that will be RCPT, recipient for short, 2. And then over here there will be some internal user. As the email is like being sent to the user on tailspintoys.com, so it will be like internal user. For now we have the administrator's account. So as soon as it sees that the recipient on submitted phase is the internal recipient, on this phase the AD call is made to the Active Directory server. So as soon as it finds the recipient to be internal or authoritative, it accepts that recipient and gives a response of 250 recipient OK. Now comes the data command, where the actual email body is started, and the source server is given this information, start mail input, and with a dot and that input. So that server, the source server, has initiated a data command. From here there will be the actual content of the message. It could be anything. So, since we are testing, we can give it anything. So as soon as the source server gives a dot after initiating the data command, the mail is like the exchange server comes to know the input for this particular message has been completed, and it now needs to deliver that message to the recipient. At this moment the message will be submitted to the queue, and then from there it will be delivered. So this was the Telnet session, and this is how any email communication happens between two email systems. So as I was saying that we will also have a look into some logs uh, of the receive connector that we have said in the beginning of this video. We'll now go to the log location of transport and go to the actual location where the message logs are generated. So under transport roles, we have a directory called logs, which will again have protocol logs directory. And under protocol log directory, we have SMTP received. So this one has been generated as we have submitted an email from the Telnet. This file has been generated, and this is how we can trace any particular message with the help of the sender and the recipient. The session has not been fully logged to the log files of transport. I will restart the transport service to show you guys how the logs are generated. This one is the session that we have just performed using the Telnet utility, wherein the sender of that message was abc@internet.com. The recipient was administrator@tailspintoys.com, and we can also see the status of the message, if that was accepted, or was it queued for delivery, or was it rejected by the transport service. So this is how we can analyze the inbound logs of transport for port 25. So that's all for today. Hope you guys learn something about the email flow today, and please subscribe to my channel and like this video, or if you guys have any suggestion on any particular topic on the Exchange server you want me to make a video on, you guys can comment it down in the comment section.